What's up, everyone? Good morning and welcome to Shaw Local Bears Insider Podcast. I am Kyle of Nabors along with Sean Hammond here. It is Friday, December 30th. Just a couple of days left in the years. Thank you, everyone who is joining us live this morning. Sorry we weren't with you earlier in this week. Had planned to jump on Tuesday morning. I was under the weather myself coming out of the Christmas holiday. But honestly, Sean, there wasn't a lot to dive into coming out of that game against the Bills, man.
Yeah, well, first off, Kyle, I'm glad to hear that you're feeling a little bit better. I know it was a couple of rough days for you there, but yeah, I don't think anybody really wanted to relive that Bills game. Any Bears fans were too interested in talking about that a whole lot more, especially with it being on a Saturday and we do our show on Monday. By the time you get to Monday, I think people were kind of over it.
Yeah, and that like I said, we were by the time we were going to do it on Tuesday morning too. When you look at it and you combine everything together between the weather conditions, the holiday week, and it being on Christmas Eve, as you were saying, um, the fact that the Bears were a significantly worse team and everyone knew it going into that game against the Bills. They're without their three top wide receivers, two starting offensive linemen, everything on the defense that was missing. Like there's just not a lot to take away from that.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have any receivers. And, when you got Justin Fields out there throwing to guys who on paper should be his third, fourth, fifth option, you don't really expect good things to happen. And good things didn't really happen in that game. The result was kind of what you would expect in that situation. Defense had a couple of nice turnovers, but really that was the only bright spot.
Yeah, so we're gonna look forward with this show. Not no reason really to look back at that game last weekend at all. Like I said, throw it away. We're gonna go ahead, and there's a lot of news to talk about. Obviously, going into this Bears Lions game this weekend, a game that's gonna be a lot of fun to watch, actually, Sean. And the big news yesterday with Kevin Warren. We're gonna get to all of that in the next 45 minutes or so. Got to get Sean out of here earlier. The Bears moved up their practice time, so Sean's got to get up to Hallis Hall a little earlier than usual on Friday. So we're gonna sign off about 10:15 this morning, guys. But everyone who is joining us live, we appreciate that. If you could give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If you're watching on YouTube, that helps people find the shows. Leave us a comment as well. Jump into the comments if you're watching live or into the live stream or into the live chat. Sorry. If you are watching live, it helps us guide the show. Lets us know what you guys want to talk about. Really, really helpful. And of course, go to shawlocal.com. You'll find all of our content there. We'll have preview stuff for Bears Lions this weekend. Sean, and of course, right now we got a story up yesterday on the breaking news of Kevin Warren doing an in-person interview with the Chicago Bears to potentially replace Ted Phillips, who is retiring as the team's president and CEO here at the end of the season. Sean, it's Pete Thamel breaking that news yesterday.
Yep.
Surprising, I guess. I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but I guess surprising was my first reaction.
That's exactly how I would describe this. I mean, I think when everybody first saw that come across the Twitter feed from ESPN, there's a little bit of a surprise, like, oh, Kevin Warren's interested. But you're right, Kyle. When you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's a guy who worked in the NFL for 20 plus years, spent 4 or 5 years as the top guy at the Vikings in charge of that organization. Worked for them for a decade before that, working his way up the chain, and previous stops with the Lions and the Rams back when they were winning Super Bowls in St. Louis in the early 2000s. And he was a sports agent before that, before he started working on the team side. So tons of NFL experience. Obviously, this is a bit of a new gig for him, a new role doing this Big Ten commissioner thing. But I think anytime you have a commissioner at such a high level, the Big Ten is really powerful. You don't have to look any further than that TV contract. Anytime you hear about them interviewing for another job, just 3 years since he started at that job, that's a little bit surprising. And there's a lot of moving parts to that. Why would he be interested in this? But if you're the Bears, I mean, heck yeah, go interview the guy. I mean, he has the experience you're looking for. He helped the Vikings build a new stadium a few years back. From that perspective, it's a no-brainer. And it sounds like he's done a couple of interviews. So this is a fairly serious thing.
Yeah, it does sound like that the Bears did a initial round of interviews via or remotely and have started doing second interviews with candidates in person as they narrow down the field. Alan Dunlap, a regular on the show here. Alan checking in this morning. Thanks, Alan. Warren means Bears are dead serious about Arlington Heights. Yeah, as Sean was mentioning there, Kevin Warren had a hand in Minnesota and Minneapolis when the Vikings built U.S. Bank Stadium. A wonderful, wonderful facility. Sean, you've been up there. I know that you like it as well. I mean that turned out about as well as you can for a modern day NFL stadium. Uh, eh, it, yeah, I mean, if anyone is wondering about the Bears or still doubting the Bears' intent, there are a lot of hurdles still to get through. There's going to be some battles moving forward once they close on this property in terms of what the funding is going to look like. I mean, the Bears are going to want funding from the state or public funding in some way when it comes to maybe not the actual build of the stadium site, but for all the infrastructure that comes with it. And let's not kid ourselves. That's difficult in normal circumstances in a politically charged environment in the state of Illinois. That's not going to be an easy thing, Sean. And having someone like Kevin Warren leading that, one, it would be helpful with his experience, and two, but like as Alan was saying, I every sign points here to the Bears being very, very serious about getting this ball moving pretty quickly once they close on this deal for Arlington Heights.
Yeah, and obviously every situation is different. The state of Minnesota is different from the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago and all that stuff. But the Vikings got a ton of money to build that stadium. I mean, I forget. I think it was priced over just $1 billion, and I think half of that was on public funding. But again, very different situations. Obviously, Vikings fans, are not going to want to let their team get away. They would sort of be in that situation to do anything they can to keep their team. And not that Bears fans aren't, but I think that it's just a different situation. And so he has experience in those conversations and getting those types of deals done. And yeah, that's very valuable. I think, while I agree with the comment that yes, this means the Bears are dead serious about Arlington Heights. I mean, if you didn't think the Bears were dead serious about Arlington Heights before this, then you weren't paying attention, because I mean, they've been dead serious about this for a year plus. And certainly, since they came out and did that public meeting right before the season and sort of just initially started talking about their plans, this is a thing that's going to happen. The Bears are going to do whatever they have to do to make it happen. And they say that they can fund the stadium itself on their own, but they want the public's help for the rest of that facility, the rest of, all the shopping and restaurants and maybe concert venues, whatever you're going to put around the stadium, hotels. That's what they want the public funding for. And I mean, they haven't said it like that clearly,
well, I mean, but like some of that could be private. I'm sure they're going to have.
Yes, I shouldn't say public funding, but funding help.
Yeah, they're going to need funding help when it comes to stuff around the stadium. You're talking about like concert venues or residential stuff. But even outside of that, we've talked about it before. We're getting a little off topic here. But there's going to need to be a lot of work done to that site in terms of getting it ready to handle the amount of traffic, everything that comes with having, 60, 70, 80,000 people attending a game day event. Mm-hmm. And not just a game day event, but that's going to be a multi-use facility most likely. So there's a lot that's going to go into that. But yeah, Kevin Warren, I think the first question there is people go, well, why would Kevin Warren want the job? But to me, like I understand why you immediately have that question. But if you think about it just for a second, like they're completely different jobs, right? And it could be the fact that like he wouldn't have to relocate. He's already in the Chicago area. He's got experience in the NFL. There's an allure. Maybe there's an allure to him of being in the NFL over college football, but also it's a lot different job in terms of you're focused on one organization where most of the people you're interacting with are within your building, compared to being the commissioner of a now coast to coast conference where you're dealing with a lot of different personality, a lot of different competing interests among universities. It's a very, very complex job that has to be very time consuming and honestly, like I would think it has to be mentally draining to run a conference of that scale.
Look how long it took them to work out this deal for the 12 team playoff, and that was the commissioners doing meetings, and that was like year plus. We started hearing about that it was almost a done deal, weeks before Oklahoma and Texas announced they were leaving the Big 12, and then that blew everything up, and they spent a year trying to figure this out, over a year. Yeah, you have all these different competing interests. It's college athletics, especially college football, is uh, in a weird place. There's no clear leadership. The NCAA doesn't have I heard the other week they were tabbing the Massachusetts governor as their next president for the NCAA or something like that, and it's met with a yawn. Like the NCAA president doesn't get anything done, and so it's a really unique and strange situation where if you come in and lead an NFL organization, yeah, you're right, Kyle. You're focused on what's going on in your building. You're building an organization, building a culture, and trying to move forward. And I don't know, Kyle, if you follow Brad Spielberger from PFF and Over the Cap, but he was saying he tweeted out yesterday that he was in the building when Kevin Warren left the Vikings, and there were a lot of sad people and just the way that he ran that organization. A lot of people seem to respect what he did for them and the culture that he built in there. And I think that would be a big reason why the Bears would want to bring somebody like this in.
Yeah, one more thing, and then we'll go ahead and pivot over and start talking about some of the on-field stuff with the Bears going into this game against the Lions. There is anything else you guys want to talk about or have any questions on Kevin Warren? Throw it into the chat. We can circle back a little later, or we get to it here before we even move on. But the thing with Kevin Warren, and I don't know how involved they would expect him to be on the personnel side. Not uh, minutely, I think at any level, but we've seen like this year they talked about Ted Phillips kind of stepping back from that role and focusing on um, the project in Arlington Heights, the potential new stadium. The thing with Kevin Warren, I think that would be his main focus, his pretty much his sole focus if he came in. But I guess the thing that should make Bears fans feel a little bit better, you go back to him talk, or you go back to the days of him being a sports agent. That is something where Ted Phillips didn't have that experience. Like the football side of things to Ted were a lot more foreign. He's learned them over the years, but obviously there was a reason most people wanted Ted Phillips out of the football side of the operation. So again, Kevin Warren coming in, if he was hired, would obviously be focused on larger projects, but I think that would be a little sigh of relief for Bears fans knowing he has more familiarity than maybe in the past.
It would at least be somebody who knows a little bit what they're doing. You're right. When they hired Ted Phillips, the experience on that side was very minimal. And I agree. If they were to hire Kevin Warren, I would think he's pretty much going to stick to the business side, stick to his side of the building. But you at least have somebody with experience in the football world who you can lean on if you have a big picture question and if you're Ryan Poles and you have a big picture question, sure, maybe you go to him and see what he thinks. I don't know that that's necessarily happening under Ted Phillips.
All right, Sean, let's go ahead and get into some stuff that's happening on the field here. We're going to dive into the comments and stuff, work our way down. Brent Coleman saying, hopefully more aggressive play calling this week. Last week's game left a lot to be desired, Sean.
Yeah, I agree that it did leave a lot to be desired. They weren't very aggressive. They weren't, I think a, a big reason had to be the weather. They were playing pretty conservatively. And it was weird because even once they not weird, but even once they kind of fell behind, they were playing a little bit conservatively. Uh, Again, this is kind of it's not concern number 1, 2, 3, whatever, but down your list of concerns from this season, it certainly is one that's there, and you've kind of seen this trend over several games this year, not every game, but a couple of times where it just seems like the offensive play calling is very, very conservative and in terms of just the Bears lead the NFL in second and 10 rushes. Did you see that this week, Kyle? When there's an incompletion on first down, the Bears lead the league in running the ball on the next play.
I hadn't seen that.
They're the only team over 50%.
They're the only. That surprises
The only
me
team over 50%.
because there are a couple other teams that I can think of.
There's a couple teams in like the high 40s. Like somebody might be 48 or something.
Okay. I hope that's a product of where this team is at.
Of what you got on the roster. Yeah.
Yeah, and not a sign of things to come from Luke Getsy, because there are a few things I dislike more than second and 10 run plays. Now I don't expect any team at any level to be 100% pass in that situation. I mean, that would be insane.
Yeah.
But you're like, the odds bear out there that when you've already lost one down and you still need 10 yards, like, the percentages are in your favor to pass it there. Like, you need to be at probably like a 65-35 clip, somewhere in that range. So up over 50% is concerning. But again, like, that could be a symptom of the personnel that they currently have on this roster.
Yeah, I mean, and especially for that game against the Bills. I mean, you look at the receivers that they had, you look at the not issues, but the guys who were, Cody Whitehair and Tevin Jenkins were missing on your offensive line. I think your only real chance in that game was probably to play it conservatively and hope that the Bills make a few mistakes, which Josh Allen did make a couple of weird throws in that game, but it wasn't enough to really, move the needle in your direction.
Rico Beard, who I have a feeling might be our. I actually think, because earlier it started out with Detroit versus everybody from Rico Beard, so I have a feeling it's our good friend Don. Don, if that's you, man, welcome to the chat. This is your week, man.
It's Lions week.
It's Lions week, yeah. But I'm sorry, I meant to keep that up there for a second. So Rico says most Bears fans don't know if they want to win this week or lose for draft position. And yeah, I mean, let's throw that out there to the chat, because it did get a lot more interesting this past week. And while watching that Bears Bills game wasn't all that entertaining, seeing the Houston Texans pick up that win and put the Bears back into play for the number 1 overall pick, because Houston, with 2 games that are winnable games here to close out the season with Jacksonville, which I don't think they'll win that game against Jacksonville. I do think that they have a chance to win that game against Indianapolis, Sean. So the Bears very much in play for the number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, look, you really only need them to win one of those games. I mean, you'd like them to win both of them, but if the Bears lose out, you only need them to win one more. But yeah, that's certainly opened the door. And man, Houston's been playing well lately. They gave the Chiefs a run. They gave the Cowboys a run the week before that. And, I say that they're still the Texans, but playing well relative to what their record says. And so, yeah, they've opened the door there. And this has been kind of the perfect scenario for the Bears. Justin Fields has played well this year, and you've lost 8 straight games. You've had a lot of one possession losses where you played well, but you didn't quite get over the hump. And your draft position has just gone up and up and up over these last 2 months. And really, I mean, that's a good thing for the Bears. And I know that the Lions, got smacked by the Panthers last week. It wasn't, they didn't do very well against the run in that game. But I still think this is a pretty feisty Lions team. That's even though they're coming off a loss, even though they're hovering around 500, they've got something to play for, and that's going to be a tough game. I imagine that the Lions fans at home this weekend are going to be pretty loud cheering on their team. It's going to be a tough environment.
It is going to be a tough environment. I mean, how often can we sit sorry, Don, I'm taking a shot at the Detroit Lions here, but how often have we been in December where the Detroit Lions are still in playoff contention? And you can, joke all we want about the fact that, expanded playoffs, this is a team that's struggling, but the Lions are playing much better. And like, I actually wouldn't be surprised if the Detroit Lions could get into the playoffs and win a game. I don't think that they advance far into the playoffs, but I do think that they, particularly on offense, they have enough firepower that they could get into a shootout, and if they get the right breaks, they could win a game.
You just got to get in. Yeah, absolutely. And they're one of those teams where their offense is so dangerous sometimes that they can certainly surprise somebody and pick off a win in the playoffs. I would not be surprised if that happened, Kyle.
Uh, Mike B, my good friend, hasn't popped into the chat yet this morning, and Gary's go ahead and making sure that we get to take the over in
Take
there
the
for
over.
us. Yeah, I mean this game against Detroit is probably going to be pretty high scoring. Um, Mike Johnson had posted in there. I had pulled up on the screen too. Play to win. I just I don't know how like this is one of those things I would love to be able to talk to NFL like front office and coaches and be like, listen, like this is off the record.
Mhm.
Ban me from the building if I ever tell anyone. But like, just can you give me a little insight? Like, what are these conversations like behind the scenes right now? Because come on, like they might not be having the conversation outright of like, oh, it'd be great if we could find a way to lose this game. But like, they know, they know exactly where they are, and they're making those. You know what I mean? Like they've I'm sure they've started a draft board, right? And they know how players are starting to get ranked. And the difference between first and second or winning a game or two and then picking sixth or seventh is going to be a huge difference in their draft planning. So they're at least thinking about these next 2 weeks. So I don't know how they address that, you know?
Yeah, I agree that I would love to be a fly on the wall, or to get that situation, to get their honest opinion. I honestly, I think if you asked Matt Eberflus and you asked Ryan Poles, I think you would get different answers. I mean, I actually do think Matt Eberflus is trying to win every game. I mean, he's that's what he's shown. That's what he said. That's everything that they've done. As far as the coaching staff is concerned, that's been their focus from playing guys like Riley Reef over Larry Borum and Alex Leatherwood and all that, and to there's numerous other examples. Now, I think if you ask Ryan Poles or Ian Cunningham, they might have a little bit different answer, but that's because their job is to think big picture, and that the GMs are thinking about that. Of course, they're thinking about where their draft stock is going to be, where their draft position is going to be. That's a huge part of their job, and yeah, that's like the difference between, like, if you're 2 versus 8, like, okay, how much do you have to study Will Anderson from Alabama if he's probably not going to be there if you're at 8 versus if you're at 2, pretty much anything is possible.
Yeah, I mean, if you're probably, I shouldn't say you're, there's a lower odd you're trading that pick if it's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 than if you're at 1 or 2. This crop of quarterbacks in this draft too, it's not particularly deep, but it's top heavy, and there are going to be guys that are going to be in contention to go first and second overall. And there's going to be a ton of teams. You already start looking through the list. Like there are legit 10 teams easily that are going to be looking for a quarterback, and not every one of those is going to be able to find guys via trade or free agency. So yeah, it makes a difference because if you ended up picking fifth and you got that defensive tackle that you're really hoping for, that's great. But if you're able to trade down from like first or second overall to seventh or eighth, and you still are getting a really good player, but you're getting way too much because some teams traded up for a quarterback. That is a huge difference in the way you plan for this offseason.
Mhm.
And maybe you're not actively doing anything to influence um how these games turn out over the next 2 weeks, but it's certainly on their mind. And uh, Matt Eberflus, Gary had talking about wanting to Matt Eberflus talking about needing to evaluate some players still. Uh, I guess the question there is: Are they talking about, do they need to evaluate veterans, or are they saying they need to evaluate young players that maybe haven't had a chance to get into enough games yet, Sean?
Yeah, I would think it's a little bit of both. I mean, there are still veterans on. They got so many guys on 1-year contracts who they got to decide if they want to bring them back or not. And at the same time, yeah, you got these young guys, and that's certainly a situation. I would, something to watch is Dante Pettis has gone out with an ankle injury this week, and he sat out completely yesterday. I have a feeling it's trending towards him not playing, and that's been your punt returner. So, is this the chance for Velus Jones to get another shot back there as your punt returner? It might be, and that might be one of those situations where exactly what you're talking about. Okay, We got some young guys. Maybe they've done this a little bit. Maybe Velus Jones has taken a couple of punts, but let's throw him back out there. He's learned some lessons the hard way, and now is the time to do that. And so I think that they're doing that with everybody, the veterans, the rookies, the young guys, everybody, that they have a lot of decisions to make on this team, and they got to figure out which of these guys they're going to keep around.
Mike Johnson said, how do you demand the best from these 20-year-old kids and then turn around and game the system? See, that's what I don't think this isn't like a Miami Dolphins situation. That's not what I'm saying. That's very rare. But what I talk about that is like, do you say like Cody Whitehair, a guy like that, a veteran player, what you have in Cody Whitehair coming off the injury here, like maybe you go ahead and say, Cody, we're gonna slow roll this here, let you get healthy and let another youngster get a chance there on the offensive line over these next couple of weeks. Part of the problem with anything like that, though, and I started thinking about the defensive side of the ball. Like I think of someone like Nick Morrow, right? But like the Bears have had so many injuries already that those guys almost have to play, because who else? I mean, you get to a point, you're not going to put a guy out there simply to get a look at him when he's not ready. And like Jack Sanborn out, right? These guys, these younger kids that you were looking to get a chance, some of them were already playing and they're out too. So I guess there are limited options if you are trying to sit anyone.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to get much more past Nick Morrow and Matt Adams at the linebacker spot. I mean, that's already so thin. It's there's plenty of other examples too, and I would think that a guy like Cody Whitehair wants to get out here and play again before the season is over. And he was back at practice yesterday. He was wearing a big old brace on his knee, but he was running around and doing stuff. And Chase Claypool was back at practice as well. He talked afterwards too and said, he's optimistic that this week he'll be back. And Equanimous St. Brown, who's been out with the concussion since that Eagles game, he returned to practice too. So I imagine that means he's going to be good to go, barring any setbacks here in the next couple of days. But that's going to give Justin Fields some offensive firepower comparatively to what he had last week for this game. And you're playing indoors, so those are all positive things. I think the Bears are, they're absolutely going to try to win these games, whatever that means for their draft situation.
Absolutely. I don't, like I said, maybe I overstated. I don't think that the guys that are on that field, the coaching staff, you said earlier, like they're going to try and win the game. It's just, I think there's more nuance here than normally would be over the last couple of weeks with where they're at.
I actually too, trying to game out the draft a little bit. I don't think that being 2 versus 1 is all that big of a deal.
No,
as far as your trade value, because if you're 2 and the Texans take Bryce Young, take CJ Stroud, whatever, one of those quarterbacks, you've got all the power in that number 2 spot for, whoever wants to trade up. I mean, potentially the Seahawks are sitting there at 3 if somebody wants to jump them. And I don't know what the Seahawks are going to do at quarterback. Obviously, Geno Smith has been a lot better than we all expected. But
free agent though.
Is he free agent? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. And if somebody wants to jump the Seahawks, I mean, you've got all the power there at that number 2 spot.
Gary had asked, I'm seeing if I can find it. He had asked, or he said he thought he saw that even if the Bears were to win out, they couldn't finish worse than 5th in terms of draft picks. I don't think that's right.
I'd have to take a look at that. I'm not quite sure.
Okay. Yeah. Let me see if I can.
Because let's see.
I mean, well, you got Denver is at 4-11 at 4 wins. Arizona's at 4 wins. Indianapolis 5.
I mean, yeah, you got a couple of teams at 4 wins right there. I mean, if the Bears win twice and they lose out, now I don't know the schedule. I don't know who's playing who. So
yeah, Atlanta
playing each other.
Atlanta and the Rams, which that pick actually goes to Detroit, are at 5 wins. So just based off that means the Bears, there's 7 teams with 5 or less wins. So the Bears could fall to 7th when it comes to that. I haven't looked at like tiebreakers or anything like that, so I'm not sure. Gary, you might be right. It would be pretty close then, but yeah, so no, absolutely no worse than 7. But I mean, That's a huge difference to me. Like second to seventh, or even second to fifth, there's a big difference when you're talking about quarterbacks.
Yeah, when you're talking quarterbacks and you're talking trade value and trying to swing a trade for somebody who wants those quarterbacks, that is a big deal.
Yeah. All right. No, someone had mentioned earlier in the chat about Devontae Adams. Not sure where that is, but I'll go with Timothy here, who had a similar question. Thoughts on rumors on possible trade picks for T. Higgins and Devontae Adams? Sean, we hit on T. Higgins, I feel like, quite a bit last week. I know I'm on board with T. Higgins. I love the kid. I think that's a great idea in terms of if he's available. We talked about the different trades with younger receivers over the last couple of years. I really, and I guess I shouldn't say really might be strong because I don't know what the potential package would be. But I would not be a huge fan of a Devontae Adams trade, assuming that it would cost you something similar to what the Packers gave, or I'm sorry, what the Raiders gave up. I don't really.
Yeah. So they gave up what, a 1 and a 2 last year? Is that what it was?
I think so.
I think it was a 1 and a 2, and you're really only 1 year removed from that. So I would think the asking price is roughly going to be the same. You're certainly not going to get rid of that number 2 overall pick for a receiver. I just don't see that happening. That's too valuable in terms of trading down. And we know Ryan Poles wants to build through the draft. I mean, you can pick up another 3 or 4 picks with that number 2 overall pick. So maybe you could start talking about your number 1 next year, but I would be surprised, especially Devontae Adams with the contract that's involved in that. I would be surprised if that's what the Bears do. Now, T. Higgins doesn't have the same contract extension. He's going to be a free agent soon. Obviously, you have to work out a deal with him.
Yeah, you're going to pay him, but I'd much rather pay T. Higgins than a 31-year-old.
Yeah, what's the age
Devontae
difference
Adams
on these guys?
Adams
is 30 right now, going to be 31 next year. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then T. Higgins obviously is younger than that.
Yeah, it's considerably younger than that. Devontae Adams, one of the best in the game over the last 5 years.
T. Higgins is 23.
Yeah, I mean that's a world of difference. And that might factor into the cost of when you're looking at a trade. I'm not a big fan of trading for aging wide receivers right now. If you're the Bears, like I think it's short-sighted, I guess. I think it's a way that you end up in a bad situation 2 or 3 years down the road when you don't need to put yourself in that position.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how these deals work out for the Raiders and for the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill. Like you said, Kyle, 3 years down the road. I mean, these are huge contracts going to receivers who are a little bit older. I mean, I'm not going to call them old. They're not old, but they're still playing at really high levels. But
even Tyreek Hill is only 28 years old. I mean, we're talking just a couple year difference. I understand that, but it goes quickly in the NFL for a lot of guys, and that might not be the case for Devontae Adams. Maybe he performs really well into his age 34 and age 35 season, but that would be an outlier.
Yeah, there are guys who played really long at a really high level at that receiver position. It's not like running back where guys fall off a cliff once they hit 28. But you're right. I mean, that's certainly the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm trading a first round pick this year, let's say, and all we're doing is speculating here. This is completely speculation at this point. But if you are the Bears and you're trading down, let's say they end up at that number 2 pick, and they trade down, right, and they end up with multiple first round picks or something like that. Like, I still don't want that to be Devontae Adams. If you're trading for T. Higgins, that makes sense. I just think it's really short-sighted to trade for an aging wide receiver. It just, again, how many scenarios? Like, you can go to, I think, a Randy Moss. Obviously, that's a big one, right? One of the best trades, or him going to New England. But that doesn't happen a ton. Like, even Devontae Adams this year in Oakland. How many years has they been in Vegas now? And I still want to call him Oakland. Like Devontae Adams, like it at the end of the day, that didn't get the Raiders, a team that was in the playoffs last year, any closer to winning the Super Bowl. And I understand there's a lot of other issues with that club, including the fact that they were dumb and hired Josh McDaniels as their head coach. But like, it's just you have to be careful, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's a very fine line to try and toe here. When you're at this stage of the rebuild, because you want to accelerate because of what you've seen with Justin Fields, but to get where they are with everything the Bears need right now to be able to be in contention in these next 2 years, you can't miss very often. And I worry that when you're trading assets for an aging wide receiver, that you're opening yourself up to a higher risk than needed.
Yeah, you are, and Ryan Poles is also. I know everybody's going to want him to come out and spend all the money in the offseason and make the moves to get the right pieces around Justin Fields, but they're looking at this as a multi-year thing. If they don't see the right answer, that if they don't see an answer at wide receiver that they feel like fits what they're trying to do and has the level of risk that they're willing or not willing to take, they can wait another year. I know Bears fans don't want to hear that, but that's the reality of it. When the guys who you thought were going to be on the free agent market, you sign these big extensions and aren't there. That's the options at wide receiver in free agency just aren't there. And uh, I don't know that they are going to want to swing a trade for a guy like Devontae Adams for like you're saying, Kyle, a guy who's a little bit older and has a big money attached to his name. I don't know if that's where the Bears are at this stage of their rebuild. Maybe a year down the line, maybe 2 years down the line. Certainly that could be the thing. But I don't know if that's where they are right now.
Yeah, if Devontae Adams was the final piece, like when um this hasn't worked out because the Arizona Cardinals are a terrible organization. But like Alan Dunlap had mentioned DeAndre Hopkins, and that's why I thought of it. They made the trades for DeAndre Hopkins and JJ Watt because they thought they were on the cusp of being able to contend, and it hasn't worked out that way. Um, I think the Bears are finally turning the corner in terms of the organizational structure, that it won't end up the way things have ended up in Arizona. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's the risk you run. And Alan said, so I guess he says, I guess we shouldn't trade for DeAndre Hopkins then, or Michael Thomas, who is younger but has been hurt the last 2 years. Yeah, I mean, this is my personal opinion, Alan. Like, if those are guys that interest you, doesn't mean that I'm right. I'm just, but I think you're tuning in because you want to have this kind of conversation, and so yeah, my opinion is I wouldn't trade for those guys. Like, I don't want to take on contracts of guys that have either been injured or are aging. I just think that there are better ways to build this roster where they currently are. If, like I said, if that was the final piece, I would be more open to it. But they need so much. I just don't think that's worth the risk.
Yeah, I wouldn't give up very much for a Michael Thomas. I mean, he hasn't been on the field for much of the last 2-3 years.
It's been a while.
He's played like half a season in the last 3 years. While he was obviously like dynamic and awesome for a while there, one of the best receivers in the league. He just hasn't been able to stay on the field. So sure, that's the type of guy where if you can get him for cheaper than what you think he's worth, yeah, maybe you take a chance. But I'm not going to give up a whole lot to go get him.
And I get so, like, Michael Thomas, for instance, like, that's a guy maybe this offseason comes together great. Like, free agent, you get the guys you want in free agency, you hit on what you needed in the draft, and then you get to that June, July period where all of a sudden you're hearing the rumors of Michael Thomas being available, and then you make that trade. You know, you're like, all right, that's that piece we go out and get now. But that's not a trade that I expect to take place in March.
No, I think you're right. I mean, that could be one of those things where we've seen these before where they kind of drag out as the season gets closer. And if a team doesn't get the type of offers they're looking for, in March or in around the draft, they could just hold on to a guy and the market will change over the next couple of months. That's how this goes sometimes.
Go get Marvin Harrison Jr. next year. Gary says it's not a bad idea. Um, Sean, we're running out of time here. We got about 5 minutes left before we get you on the road to Hallis Hall. Anyone throw final thoughts into the chat there? We'll try and get to them. Alan says here, Kyle, I agree. I like when people agree with me. Kyle, I agree, but no one is going to give away these wide receivers. To Sean's point, maybe the star wide receiver is in 2024. Excuse me, guys. Yeah, I don't expect anyone to give these guys away. Like I said, if I was Ryan Poles, I'd be willing to pay through the nose for T. Higgins. I believe in the upside of a young player like that. I don't mind taking a chance like that, a big swing. Again, that is a higher risk move, but I think the potential upside over a longer period of time, like T. Higgins is a guy, he's just going back, Tyreek Hill, 28 years old, Devontae Adams. That's another 5 years of the development time. That is a long window where instead of talking 3 or 4 years, you're talking 5, 6, 7 years down the road, Sean.
Yeah, certainly. And if we spent a lot of time talking about Devontae Adams. If you're the Raiders, and if this is it for Derek Carr. I mean, having a guy like Devontae Adams is one of those big draws for if you're trying to bring in another quarterback. And a veteran quarterback might look at that situation and say, okay, I can work with this. We have some pieces on that offense to be able to get this thing rolling, and they might not feel that they're that far away down in Vegas. So even if
they should feel
they should, but they might not feel that way. And even if Devontae Adams is a little bit upset that his buddy is just gotten benched and might be getting released, you still are in control of that player, and so if they want to keep him, they will.
This is a good place to finish this up. Kind of a lighthearted place as we get out of here. I was texting friends, I believe a couple friends yesterday, and we were talking about like over the last. I think I ended up setting it like since 2000, but if we even went a little more recent, like the worst overall franchises in the NFL or the worst run franchises, and the Bears are certainly like in that top 10 in that conversation. But it was funny, despite the fact that, the Bears record this year and how poorly things have gone, like you start looking around the league and like you're looking at Cleveland and the contract they gave to Deshaun Watson and how that thing's gone. What's happened the last several years now with the Raiders, who have always been kind of a dumpster fire. Houston has never been able to consistently figure things out. And it was kind of funny because like, maybe going into this season with the way things ended under the Ryan Pace regime and everything, the way things were going, I think the Bears were probably firmly in that top 3 to 5 conversation, but they've kind of moved down those rankings. And that's where I'm getting at here is where like, it's odd because the fact that the Bears only have 3 wins, we're talking about them being in conversation of the number 1 pick. But for once, I don't get the sense again, like that, it's odd. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying, Sean?
Yeah, I do. That's what's so weird about this season is this team has 3 wins, but you walk into that building and you talk to the players and you don't feel that. There's positive vibes going on, and they know that this season has not gone to plan, and it's they haven't played well. That's just the fact. But they are excited about the direction that this team is going. They feel like things are heading in the right way. And it's funny, Kyle, like you mentioned the teams you mentioned there, the Raiders, the Texans, and it's like, it's weird how, I don't know if it's weird, but the teams that are consistently bad are the ones that seem to have the worst ownership, or the ones that have the most volatile ownership. And over again, we see those same teams in these same situations.
And that's what we were talking about in the text thread, because it's not just when I look at, you got to look at overall, like change at every level of the organization outside of ownership. Typically, those don't change hands very often, obviously, but teams that are consistently, whether it's personnel on the field, their coaching staff, their training staff, their front, like their everything, and it was funny. I wanted to put Denver, and that's how actually we got into the conversation about how you do it, because like Denver, You look at all the changes that they've gone through, and we're like, well, how do you rank the fact that they won a Super Bowl, were in another, but it was like Peyton Manning kind of fell into their laps, and without that, it would just be a dumpster fire for a very long
Yeah.
stretch of time. Pretty much, it was a fun conversation, and one that we'll probably get into more in the off season here. I want to go back quickly here. And follow up on the T Higgins talk a little bit because I'm not sure what this name is supposed to say. Sorry, guy. But he says, I tend to think there's a wide receiver star in every draft. You have to identify him. And the trickiest part is being in position to get him. And then Mark Potash, Potsy checking in saying T Higgins was 33rd pick of the 2020 draft. And yeah, those are both good points. Wide receiver is a position where you can find those guys in the draft. You can find superstars in those second and third rounds. I will
especially in those 30s, 40s, 50s.
Yeah, I will say the 2020 and 2021 drafts were incredibly wide receiver rich. And I'm not going to personally say that I know enough about this current draft class to say that I know the people that do have a better idea than I do about it at this point are not saying that about this wide receiver class. But that being said, that doesn't mean you can't find someone there in that second or third round. So yeah.
Well, and that's why I didn't really have. I know people were upset with the Claypool trade that they gave away their higher second round pick, which right now is looking like it's 34. And actually, that'd be really the 33rd pick because Miami's going to lose their pick. But it's either you either have Chase Claypool or you're begging the Bears to take a wide receiver at that spot. So okay, sure, you traded away that pick for a wide receiver. I'm fine with that because if you didn't do that, then you'd just be in a worse situation and trying to take a gamble on a rookie wide receiver. So yeah, sure, the Bears do need to bring in more help at wide receiver, but I was okay with that move, and I'm not really all that upset about giving away the higher of those two picks for a guy like Chase Claypool, who sure he hasn't had a lot of production yet, but he was just getting his feet wet before this injury.
Yeah, Shaw Locals Bears Insider podcast is sponsored by Marengo Guns. Always buying, always paying top dollar for your guns, ammo, and military items. Come see the experts at Marengo Guns. Open 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. 7 days a week. Sean, you mentioned Chase Claypool there. That's a good place to end this topic because going into these last two games, going into this weekend in Detroit, we look at players that you do want to see more. There's a guy that certainly does need to be on the field. Considering what the Bears gave up for him, would like to see some more production from Chase Claypool over the last 2 weeks, considering the lack of production from the wide receiver group with all these injuries. Chase Claypool needs to have a couple good games here. I guess he doesn't need to have a couple good games, but for the sake of Bears fans and maybe for his own sake, going into this offseason to feel a little bit better of where this is at with him.
Yeah, I think he just needs to get back out on the field. He doesn't need to pile up 100 yards in this game. Well, that'd be great, of course. But if you just get out there and make a couple of catches, I mean, he's been sitting on the sideline going through this knee injury, and that's not what you want. You want to see a little bit of chemistry with Justin Fields. On paper, he's your top guy, but obviously that, it's been a weird year for the Bears passing game. EQ St. Brown could lead them in receiving this week. I don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, you want to see him get back out there on the field.
He chimes in. It's Auger, like a drill.
Auger.
Spelled out.
Thanks for joining, Auger.
Yeah, I was leaning Auger, but I didn't want to take a guess there. So nice to have you, Auger. Sean, let's give a prediction before we get out of here. What do you think for this weekend's game?
I haven't sent you my prediction because I've been going back and forth. I'm going to take the Lions. I think this will be yet another high-scoring Lions game. I'm going to take the Lions 35-31. Are the Bears going to score 31 points? See, I'm literally thinking about this as the Lions games are so high-scoring. Like every single time.
I started laughing not because of that. I started laughing because that was the exact score I was going to give. Yeah. I'm taking. I'm taking the Lions to win 35-31. I think I wish Mike B was here so he could pound the over in the chat because this game is going to have a ton of scoring.
What was the score a few weeks back or a month or two back? It was like 32-31 or something like that.
Yeah,
it was a 1-point game in the 30s.
the Lions are playing shootouts right
Yeah.
now. The Bears defense is just not stopping anyone. As long as Tevin Jenkins and Cody Whitehair are on the field this weekend, I think that makes the biggest difference. Of course, this game being indoors compared to 10-degree temperatures
There's going
last
to be
week and
more
30
points
mile per hour
indoors,
winds. Yeah,
for sure.
This everything just lines up to this game being an absolute shootout.
Yeah, I'm taking the Lions. They didn't look very good last week, but and certainly the Bears can follow that script. Just run the ball. Heck, Carolina was running like crazy. Their offensive line looked like the best O line in the history of football last week. But I do kind of think with something to play for, the Lions are going to bounce back.
All right. Well, thank you everyone who joined us live this morning. If you didn't, or if you just like listening to the show, find it for the first time, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on iTunes, on Spotify. We are on pretty much every platform you can think of at this point. We'll be back with you guys next week to break down the Lions-Bears game. With that, everyone have a great and wonderful long weekend. I always enjoy when New Year's falls on the weekend like this. Give everyone that Monday off. So everyone enjoy it. Stay safe this weekend. Enjoy the weekend of football. Get some college football semifinals as well. Sean, we'll be back with you guys on Tuesday. For Sean Hammond, I am Kyle Nabors. We'll talk with you guys next week.